Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's. At Local Joe's, we help local businesses. Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's.
This is City Pulse Newsmakers, a weekly look at the issues and the people behind them in Greater Lansing. Brought to you by City Pulse, Lansing's weekly alternative newspaper. And now, here's your host, City Pulse publisher, Burl Schwartz.
Good morning. There's an outsized controversy over a tiny park that's been going on for months now in Lansing, and our guest today is at the center of it. He's Richard Peffley, General Manager of the Lansing Board of Water and Light. Dick, welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you, Burl. Great to be here.
Thank you. And joining us as well is Mickey Hurton, Associate Publisher and Columnist of City Pulse.
Happy to be here.
Good. All right. Well, let me take a moment now to summarize the plot thus far. The BWL has been engaged in an effort to convince the City Council to give it a special land use permit so that it can build a power substation in Scott Park, which is 6 acres at Washington and Malcolm X Avenues next to Cooley Gardens and the Michigan Women's Historical Center. To put the new central substation there, the BWL has said it would need to tear down or move the Scott Center, which is also known as the Jennison House or the Scott House, and also move to elsewhere in Scott Park, the Scott Sunken Garden. This has got preservationists and the Garden Club up in arms, and their efforts have been pretty good, I guess, because there is some doubt about the outcome of this vote on Monday night before City Council for the land use permit. So Dick, Randy Hannon, who's the spokesman for Mayor Bernero, told the council on August 22nd, and I'll quote him, "Building the substation is essential to Lansing's long-term energy security and to retiring the coal-fired Eckert power plant by 2020. Let's parse that a bit. Let's start with the security issue. Assuming it is essential to have a new central substation somewhere, and the central substation feeds downtown and the GM. Why does it need to be in Scott Park?
Right now, the cables that leave the existing substation, which is located at Eckert Station, they run underneath the ground and they run underneath General Motors. When the Grand River Assembly Plant was built, they built over those cables. And so the cables run underground to where the park is right now. And then the 16 cables that feed downtown, which is a third of our load, they split and they go off to different businesses. They hang on the overpasses, underneath the overpasses, and that is the last spot where the cables are all together. So you have to build a substation before the cables split because that's what we call the sweet spot. And along the corridor between Eckert and that park is General Motors, and we worked with GM for almost a year, and they tried diligently to give us land where we could build on their site. But every time we ran up a flagpole with them and their corporate people, they have those sites spoken for the future, which I believe is good for Lansing. It means they've got something coming here, which would be good for all of us, and they just couldn't do it. And they really worked hard. They weren't being adversarial here. So unfortunately, it landed us at the park site. That's the last piece of property before all of our conductors, the 16 conductors that run there, split and head off to the businesses.
But does that mean that it's essential to build it there versus building it elsewhere, albeit at more cost?
Yes, if you were to build it elsewhere, you would have to figure out how to tie into those cables. So if you decided that you wanted to build it somewhere else, which we took a serious look at 9 alternative sites, we still have to end up coming back to that park to tie into the cables, because you have to get to the existing cable somehow. Now, it would be less intrusive because you'd be digging there and tying in the cables, and there'd be some kind of small structure associated with it, but nothing the magnitude of a substation. So we looked at sites around the garden to see if we could make it cost effective, and it's just very, very expensive. So we looked at the lease cost. option, and unfortunately that brought us to the park because we don't want to build the park either. This has been a real uphill battle for us. We generated a lot of controversy, and we're not in business to do that. The folks that we're trying to work with on this, they're customers, they're ratepayers. And technically the residents are our owners. So we're trying to do the best we can to balance the budget and shut the Eckerd coal plant down in 2020 with pleasing as many of our customers as we can.
I think the money is important because it is that. It's about $30 million, maybe 27 and change, to put the substation at the park, correct?
To build the substation at the park is $26 million.
And then to put it elsewhere would add how much to that?
It's twofold. One is the increase to do it, and depending on which site you look at, that can be as much as $30 million more. But what it does is, unfortunately, it delays us closing the Eckerd station. And if I can hit on that a little bit for you. The board staff has done a very good job to have Eckerd wore out at 2020, so that we're not retiring an asset that's got a lot of life in it. Now, to extend that life, you have to meet certain government requires and insurance requirements, and you have to extend the life of the equipment. You can't just extend it for a day. Any of the upgrades we do will give it 7 years of life.
And that's mandatory? It's got to be that much? Because that's what people say. Well, why don't you, like at a house, you could extend it for a year, your car, you can fix it.
It's a great question, and we've explained it to people, and I'm glad to get an opportunity to do it again. Is you have boilers and turbines in there, and the turbine is rated for 7 years, 50,000 hours. When it hits that mark, it has to be rebuilt for safety, reliability, and when you do that, you buy another 7 years. Now, moving a substation elsewhere isn't going to take 2 years additional to build it. Some sites would take a year, some would take 2 years, but none of them can be built in a time frame to shut Eckerd down in 2020. So you make the investments Eckerd, and you could make the case, well, you just walk away from Eckerd then too and leave 5 or 6 years of life there, and you write that cost off. But what I'm trying to do is to keep the rates down. The board had raised rates 57% in 7 years, over 7 years, and in the last 2 years, we've turned that around. We haven't had a single rate hike in 2 years, and we've worked hard to do that. And we now have about a 10% rate differential between our nearest competitor and our residential rates.
Yeah, Dick, I want to make sure I understand, though. Is it essential to build it in Scott Park, or is it essential to build it in Scott Park to keep the cost down?
It's definitely the least cost option. And
okay, so it's not essential to our energy future. It's essential to keeping the cost down.
Yes, absolutely. To be honest with you, I probably could build it anywhere. It's given time and money. I could build it on the moon.
Now, the 2020, closing down Eckerd.
Yes.
Well, this is a substation. If I understand it correctly, all this does is pass along energy or convert it from one voltage to another, but it's not creating energy. What's the connection? I mean, why couldn't you shut down Eckerd, but for the time being, keep the central substation where it is now, which is next to Eckerd? What's the connection between that and shutting down Eckerd?
It's a reliability requirement that we have, that when you shut Eckerd down, you have to have a new substation in place and up and running. It's a NERC standard. And the conductors that run from
NERC,
National Energy Requirement for us. And it's a government standard for reliability that we have to comply with. And when Eckerd's running, it's considered a backup for the substation. When Eckerd's gone, the substation doesn't meet those requirements now. The new substation will meet those requirements.
So because it would have no backup?
It's a little more complicated, but essentially, yes.
I mean, explain the complications.
The complications is that we need to have more than one source to feed downtown. We need to have 2 sources with a backup. Right now, the way that Eckerd's configured, the 6 generating turbines that are there, 3 are still in operation. Those are each one of those are considered backups for the substation to send power downtown. Once Eckerd's gone, the substation doesn't have a backup. When we take and build a new substation, as well as 4 other ones that we're rehabbing or constructing around town, we will meet those requirements by moving the voltage around in a different venue. And you're absolutely right that the substation just takes and converts a high voltage to a usable voltage for our customers. So there's no power generated there. Now, a substation needs to be located close to the end user, because the low voltage, which is usable for the customers, has a limited range to push to put it through the wires before it becomes unreliable. So that's why the high voltage that goes around town, we can push that for long distances. But when we build a substation, we build it in usually like close to the city loads, or you can see them scattered around town. There's probably about 24 of them. And this substation, one of the things that when we looked at replacing it, we looked at some farther, pushing it back farther, like where it's at Eckerd. It's actually too far from downtown where Eckerd is, because Eckerd was built and downtown developed around it. So we're trying to get it closer. Some of the sites that we looked at that were farther south, the cost to push the electricity goes up, and because it's not as efficient. So we're trying to put it as close to our downtown load for reliability.
All right, and Mickey, give me 1 second because I'm old and I'll forget. I've already forgotten. No, you've given the $30 million figure as the worst case scenario if City Council turns you down. What's the best case scenario if City Council said no, you can't have Scott Park? What is the best case scenario?
What's Plan B?
Right now, plan B is not good because we're not sure. The cost to build it is $26 million at the Scott Park.
Now we've heard 27.4.
Well, because there's $1.5 million for transmission, which we would have to do most any place in that vicinity. So we're trying not to confuse anybody. So we're using apples to apples. Substation cost is $26 million.
Okay.
And so you have 2 additional costs. No matter where else we build it, we have to extend the life of Eckerd, and that is a huge pot of money. And then
well, wait, why is that?
Because anywhere else we build it, we can't meet the time frame to shut Eckerd down by 2020.
Why is that?
The other sites, when you look whether you'd have to take buildings down by right-of-ways, you'd have to, at Eckerd, if you were to try to relocate a new one there, you'd have to go through a permitting process for building in a floodplain, and there's one of the sites over by Rio we looked at, there's river crossings. They all really extend the time frame.
The Diamond Rio site?
Yeah, that was one. We also looked at a site just north of our Rio power plant, and that would have caused us to have to take out about a city block for the houses. So we'd have to buy people out, and some people may not be interested in leaving. So it gets tied into a battle.
Okay.
And
so the best case scenario, if Plan A fails,
yes.
What is that, and how long would it extend how much longer do you have to keep Eckerd open in that case?
Okay, so if the Scott Garden site doesn't pan out, any of the other sites will require us to extend the life of Eckerd. And
right.
So we would do that, and then depending which site that we decided to land on, ranges, in price exponentially. I mean, I think the price to keep Eckerd open is like $30 million. I don't want to misquote that, but I know to redo Eckerd, and then the increase to move the sub. To move the sub, every foot that you move from that site for wires alone is $4,000 a foot. That's what it costs to build the infrastructure to bury the 16 conductors. It's not just wires buried in the ground. It's a wire that goes through a pipe, and then it's usually have 1 wire per pipe, so they would build in a series of 16 pipes, and they encase it in concrete so that it's safe and so the contractor can't dig into it. It's just a very expensive process. So you can look as you start moving east and west from that site, because the wires right now run north and south. Every foot is $4,000, and that's where the price really adds up.
Right. Mickey?
Well, the substation in some respects to me is something of a distraction, because I'm looking at the 2020 closing of Eckerd.
Yes.
And it seems to me that the utility just has a tremendous problem or opportunity in the future. But if it closes Eckerd, it has to find new sources of power, which are going to be very expensive. Mm-hmm. And time consuming, and who knows what kind of regulatory issues. Talk about that problem.
Let me make sure I understood you. The problem of how to replace the capacity and energy that belongs
we're going to go off coal.
Yes, we're going to.
For all intents and purposes, close our traditional coal plants, and you're going to find new sources of power.
Correct.
At a very high cost. To
Yes.
build, capital costs.
Yes, the capital costs are high, but the operation costs will be much less because new plants are far less labor intensive. And the fuel source right now, if you were to look at natural gas is cheaper than coal to buy. Now, it's everybody's best guess whether it will stay that way as plants convert. However, we're also looking at an enhanced renewable portfolio. We're building 20 megawatts of solar out in Delta Township, and we're looking at a big wind farm to buy into up in the Thumb area. So those energy sources will help replace the capacity and energy that will be lost by Eckerd, but there'll still need to be some kind of base load plant.
Right.
So when the renewables aren't available, because there's no sun at night and sometimes there's no wind, and so when those renewables aren't available, you still have to supply the energy.
Well, let's talk about the owners, the ratepayers.
Yes.
How much are they going to have to pay to do all of this?
Well,
What is the cost to them?
That will be a good segment in about 6 months because we're doing our strategic plan right now.
Right.
To get our commissioners to, they will set a policy. They'll say, oh, Mr. General Manager, we want you to have this amount of renewables in our portfolio and this amount of baseload energy. That'll be done over the next couple weeks. And when that's done, then I can go back and say, okay, we want to be 40% renewable by 2030. That's our
Right.
goal right now. That's a goal that look around the country and trying to find somebody that's got that aggressive a goal. And then if that is adopted, then I will look to see what kind of base load do I need to invest in to support those renewables when they're not available, and then I can cost it.
Well, give me a range. It could be from what to what?
It could be in the $250 million range to build a new plant, and the renewables that are associated with it. Yes.
That's
Well,
cheap. It costs you almost $200+ million to do the real station, right?
Yeah, Rio was $183 million to do Rio,
Right.
and that replaced 4 of the units at Eckerd. There was 10 units there, and so.
I mean,
But if you're talking about shutting down Eckerd
Yes.
4 years from now, why aren't we talking now about where this $250 million new plant would go?
Well, the first step in closing Eckerd was to rehab our transmission distribution system so we could stay in compliance with our reliability requirements, which is what we're doing. The central sub, which is taking a lot longer than we expected, but we've got 4 other subs being rehabbed and in the process of being built, which is not on anybody's radar, and I'd like to keep it that way. Once they're done, then we move to the next phase of replacing energy Eckerd. And we've been working on the closure of Eckerd for probably 2 years now, looking at how the staffing will change, what kind of energy. And it all comes down to the strategic plan to make sure that our commissioners who set the policy for management to follow, that they're on board for where we're headed, and they're reviewing that right now.
so where would you like to put it? If you were king of Lansing, where would you put the thing?
Oh, King of Lansing.
I know Verge would be pissed, but you can.
Okay. Well, Erickson is our other power plant right now, and there's over 500 acres out there. A lot of room to put it out there. There's a couple industrial sites in Lansing, I suppose, that we could look at if it brought jobs to Lansing. So. We'll know a lot more in 6 months, and we are on a perfect trajectory to have a new plant up and running to replace Eckerd by 2020. Getting through the process. We did the IRP process. We brought a group of citizens together to see, are we going down the right track here?
Right.
Is our renewable makeup where it should be? Do you want more or less renewables? One of the surveys, which was really a change I've ever seen, is the first time our customers overwhelmingly said they'd pay up to $10 extra a month for renewables. It's always been, we want renewables at no cost. Well, $10 is a lot of money per month on your bill.
Let me get back, if I could, to closing Eckerd. So Brad Van Gilder, who represents Beyond Coal Clean Energy Campaign, says the location of the substation is completely irrelevant to retiring the Eckerd Power Station. BWL has never given any information about why there would be a 7-year delay in retiring the Eckerd Power Station. They need to substantiate that claim. Let's drill down a little on that. So why does it have to be 7 years?
Okay, Brad is correct in the closing the power plant and where the substation is located don't go hand in hand. Having a substation online before Eckerd closes is what we have to do. So as you read his question, he's right. This substation, like I said, it could be built anywhere. It just has to be built and online to take power from other sources when Eckerd can no longer supply the power to the substation.
Right.
So he's correct there. And the 7 years is kind of what we spoke about a little earlier. If you're going to extend the life by putting a capital money into Eckerd, you buy 7 years of life. You could elect to run it for 1 year and then write off the 6 years of capital, because if you say built a substation somewhere else and it was finished in 2021, then
Yeah, so the substation, you're saying Eckerd couldn't continue to operate one more year as is?
no, it wouldn't be in compliance. No,
And-
well,
and-
one more
and
year.
compliance
But can't
with
run
whom?
from our insurance carriers and our boiler operating permits with the MDEQ. So that would, and when we say 1 more year, it's from 2020 to, it couldn't run into 2021. It's not, next year. So I want to make sure that, we've got 4 years of life basically left in Eckerd Station.
Okay. All right. I guess the concern of the preservationists is in part, there are, different people have different views on this.
Absolutely.
I personally, my biggest problem is I don't want to see this huge grid, even though you're going to build walls that will partially cover it up. I have a real aesthetic problem with seeing it there. But other people say, this is a great old house. I know Mickey disagrees with that,
dump.
but if it's a dump now, it's because the city has allowed it to become a dump. The sunken garden, I think, has historical value according to national authorities and that sort of thing.
But you're willing to relocate the sunken garden, right?
Yes, and that would be our plan.
But they say then it will lose its historical value. I mean,
But it could have more people see it.
You said earlier, you don't like being in a fight over a park, but you put yourself in that position, and so I know, Dick, you rose up through the ranks at BWL. You have a reputation as a man of the people. As you look at what you want to happen to the city of Lansing, and one of the assets of this city is parkland, do you feel good about this?
If I could build it somewhere else, absolutely. I hear it from, walking down the street, people come up and they're sympathetic, they know us. We have nothing to gain here. If we could build it somewhere else, we would. But I turn 80 to 100 people off every day for non-payment. That hurts me. And if I drive rates up 4% a year because we're taking and converting 4 acres of parkland into 2 acres, and now I have to turn off 150 people a year. It's a tough decision that I guess they pay me to make, that this is the place to put it. And what I'm thinking, I drove by that place for 20-some years. Now, and I never went in there. Now I've been going in there, and I look at the utilization. I think, and I'm completely honest with you, I think it'll be a better place. I think that when we take that 2 acres, we're putting $4 million of improvements, that the city doesn't have that kind of money to put improvements in their park system. I think that it'll be better utilized. It's not ADA compliant right now. If somebody pushed that issue, the city would probably just close it off because they don't have the money to do it. The process.
And are you talking about access to the river trail and other things?
Access to that, and actually the sunken garden. The
Right.
grade isn't compliant, and if somebody falls and slips or falls, the city's in they probably have some exposure. I'm not an attorney, I don't want to get into that. But I met with a lot of folks on this, and even though I haven't got preservation on my side, and bear in mind we were hand in hand when we did the Rio, and we'll be hand in hand on something else coming down the road. Don't know what that is. This isn't scorched earth or divorce. I look at this as a marital spat. These are our customers, these are owners, and you're right. I understand. The input that they've had, the Rio Town Association, who we have got supporting us now, it has changed this project. If you go around town and look at a typical $10 million substation with some fences and gangly wires and stuff that are sitting in people's back, yards at the corner, this is what we've changed, trying to be transparent and build it there. So the process, has gotten a lot of input, and we've made a lot of changes. And some people say, well, the walls are 20 feet. Some say, well, they only have to be 8 feet, and they could be chain link. So we're wanting the public, tell us what you want. Do you want a 20-foot wall? Do you want an 8-foot wall that maybe shows more of the building? We'll make a nice building so that you don't have it. There's a 10-foot wall there right now when you come around the corner. Just recently, a group says, can you set it back off of Washington so the wall isn't right to the sidewalk? Because there's a wall there now, it looks terrible. And we found a way to move it back about 20 feet, so there'll be a little bit of green space. So I'm just trying to balance the wishes of 100,000 customers, you know, what's best for them. And I believe that for the future Lansing, I think it's good. The closest resident is Fountain Place right there overlooking it, and they'll come right on here and tell you that it's the sooner we break ground, the happier they'll be. I feel confident because they say they look down at an unkept site that's underutilized, and now they can go down there and use it. I think they think it'll help them attract. But the manager there, I've had 2 site meetings with her saying, you know.
But
is
the
this
other
what you
side
want?
of that, and this isn't
Yeah.
BWL's fault, the other side of it is the city has let it decline, and then what naturally happens is, you know, it's a dump, so we'll tear it down instead of being proactive about at least maintaining it. So someday when the city is rich again, when GM does all these things that, you know, it apparently is promising to do in secret, that we'll have all kinds of money.
Yeah, but in the city's defense, though, they've had such significant budget cuts, state budget cuts, that is this where I wanted them investing their money over the last? I mean, if I'm a preservationist, then I think I'm occasionally going to go to that park. But I'm like you. I passed that thing the entire time I lived here, and I never even knew it was there.
On his way to Okemos.
Well, yeah. But I worked downtown, and I spent a lot of time in Cooley Gardens. I would go there. I would bet I'd go there a couple times a week because it was sweet. I never even knew it was over there. And so I don't really see the big loss, I mean, myself. But I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I just had, by coincidence, I just had lunch with Rick Jones.
Oh, yes.
And we're talking about, I'm saying, let's come to this interview. And I said, you know, BWL has this huge set of expenses coming up. He says, well, that's nothing. He says, Lansing is the problem. He says Lansing, with his pension obligations, is really worrisome. So I'm asking you then, so you're CEO of BWL. When you think about it, you're sitting in the shower, or you're driving around, you think about the company that you run. What do you think it's worth?
Well, dollar-wise?
Yeah.
I've never looked at that, but what I do look at is where is it positioned? And
So let me just get this straight.
Yeah.
As the CEO of this company, you have no idea what you think it's worth.
oh, it's, you know, people say it's $1 billion company.
Well, what do you think? I mean,
Well,
because you're a professional.
My professional opinion is a $500 or $600 million asset.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what the figure, and that's back to Jones's
Yeah.
saying, if Lansing really gets into trouble
You know,
and goes Detroit-like, first thing they're going to do is court order a sale of BWL, and we were talking, would that cover it? And it might.
well, there's some debt that would have
Yeah.
to be
Oh, yeah,
looked
but-
at, and
You'd
you're
also
right.
need someone to buy it.
Yeah, you got somebody to buy it, and you also have to look at it's 4 different utilities. You know,
Yeah.
you have water, steam, and chilled water, which are very small businesses that, you know, there would be really no interest on them. What would happen to them? You can't get out of the steam business. We actually looked a few years ago. There's no way to do that. You know.
All right, well, I'm going to have to cut you off.
No.
Congratulations on definitely turning the conversation elsewhere. And with that,
I'm
gentlemen,
just thinking of our listeners.
yes, thank you again for being here, you too, Mickey, and we will see you next week.